that chapel is guarded by armed men. The whole town is an armed camp that is protecting what they believe to be the Ark of the Covenant, but it's guarded particularly by one guy who is the official guardian of the Ark.
The Ark of the Covenant, one of the most powerful and mysterious relics in human history, is said to hold the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. For centuries, its whereabouts have been a mystery until now. Shocking claims suggest the CIA has used top-secret remote viewing programs to track it down. Could this legendary artifact really have been found? The Ark of the Covenant in historical context. Throughout history, few artifacts have captured collective imagination as much as the Ark of the Covenant. Ancient texts describe it as a sacred chest that held the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. While this religious context is widely known, the Ark's deeper background and role in shaping various cultures and beliefs is a complex story that still intrigues many. The Ark first appears in biblical narratives associated with the Exodus. The Israelites, having fled Egypt, carried the Ark through the desert as a sign of divine presence. It was crafted from acacia wood, then plated in gold, a design intended to set it apart from everyday objects. 2 figures referred to as cherubim, though sometimes the terms cherubim and seraphim get blended in popular descriptions, were placed on its lid to form the mercy seat, a fitted cover representing a direct contact point between humankind and the divine. This design was kept in the inner sanctum of the tabernacle, highlighting its extraordinary holiness. Early Hebrew texts describe how the Ark went before the Israelites in battle, how it parted the Jordan River, and how it was central to religious rites. Eventually, it was reportedly moved to the Temple of Solomon. This temple was built in Jerusalem, precisely to house such a sacred object in its most concealed area, the Holy of Holies. Historically, the Babylonians destroyed the temple in 586 BCE and carried many spoils back to Babylon. Texts are ambiguous about whether they seized the Ark or if it was hidden beforehand by priests who wanted to protect it. From that point onward, the Ark's location became a mystery. Outside of Hebrew tradition, many scholars wonder if the design of the Ark was influenced by Egyptian religious customs. Moses, as tradition asserts, was raised at Pharaoh's court and would have been familiar with Egyptian ceremonies, funeral rites, and special containers. Some point to parallels in Egyptian holy barks or ritual chests that carried religious items, while others note that Old Testament references may reflect broader cultural exchanges in the Levant region. Over the centuries, the Ark became an icon representing many ideas: law, holiness, the presence of God, and the identity of the Israelite people. Early Christian thinkers sometimes saw the Ark as a metaphor for Christ or for Mary. In Catholic traditions, Mary is called the Ark of the New Covenant, suggesting she carried divine truth. In Judaism, the Ark persists as a potent spiritual symbol tied to temple theology and Jewish identity. Some Islamic traditions adopt the Ark's story with slightly different details, keeping alive the notion that it remained hidden but powerful. Because of these overlapping beliefs, the Ark has transcended a single religion and can be found in folklore, apocryphal texts, and repeated attempts to physically locate or reconstruct it, despite centuries of searching, both by amateur explorers and by serious archaeologists. The Ark remains elusive in terms of direct evidence. Many have advanced theories about hidden tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, possible shipping records from ancient times, and secret societies that might have guarded or transported the Ark. Yet no widely accepted archaeological find has ever been declared to be the biblical Ark. Sightings, rumors, and occasional news claims continue to surge, but none have been validated beyond a doubt. The CIA's remote viewing program. The Central Intelligence Agency's involvement with remote viewing is often traced back to broader U.S. government interest in psychic phenomena during the Cold War era. While it might sound far-fetched today, policymakers and intelligence analysts at that time were concerned that Soviet researchers were making headway in extrasensory perception, ESP, or telepathy. They feared a potential psychic gap in much the same way they worried about nuclear or missile technology gaps. This climate led to secretive experiments, eventually yielding formal research programs like Project Stargate and others at various times. The term remote viewing typically describes the ability of a person to gather details about distant or unseen locations, objects, or even events without using ordinary senses. Early experimenters at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, such as Ingo Swann and Harold Puthoff, worked on structured protocols designed to eliminate guesswork or unconscious biases. These protocols usually involved double-blind methods to ensure that neither the subject, the remote viewer, nor the interviewer knew the target in advance of the session. From the 1970s through the mid-1990s, different parts of the US intelligence community, along with the Army, tested remote viewing. Joe McMonigal, labeled as Remote Viewer Number 1, remains one of the more recognized participants. He was honored for describing a new Soviet submarine in dry dock during a session, a detail some took as concrete evidence that remote viewing could offer deliverable intelligence. Supporters claimed other successes as well, pointing to specific times where the information gleaned seemed to match real data about secret sites or missing individuals. However, skepticism within the intelligence community was always present. Many officials and scientists considered remote viewing anecdotal or reliant on chance. They argued that confirming outcomes might be the result of retrofitting, the process of adjusting vague or symbolic remote viewing data after the fact to fit known truths. Others questioned the reliability of sessions that produced contradictory or far-fetched claims. Despite these divisions, the CIA took its remote viewing program seriously enough to maintain it in various forms for years. Part of the reason for continued funding might have been the small cost compared to other intelligence methods. Another reason could have been that a few successes compelled further study, even if most attempts fell short. As documents have slowly been declassified over time, the public has learned that these psi experiments included some truly unusual targets. The 1988 Ark of the Covenant session is one especially memorable example because it goes far beyond the typical scope of gathering strategic or military intelligence. When the CIA declassified many of its remote viewing records around August 2000, the revelations sparked a renewed debate. Some people championed the boldness of exploring mine-based collection methods, while others mocked the notion that serious intelligence resources could be allocated to something so unconventional. Yet for those fascinated by mysteries like the Ark of the Covenant, the CIA's involvement showed that the government was, at least for a time, open to exploring these legendary topics through psychic means. The 1988 remote viewing session targeting the Ark. One of the more remarkable revelations within the CIA's declassified files centers on a remote viewing session dated December 5, 1988. According to these records, a viewer identified as Remote Viewer Number 32 was presented with a sealed envelope containing instructions to locate and describe an unspecified target. They did not know the target was the legendary Ark of the Covenant. This approach, often called blind targeting, was consistent with protocols designed to reduce unconscious bias. The session took place at around 9:15 a.m., and the viewer was guided by a monitor who also did not see the sealed instructions. As the session began, the viewer began describing a Middle Eastern setting, mentioning Arabic language, mosque domes, and individuals wearing white robes. Over time, the viewer's impressions focused on an underground chamber that was dark, damp, and seemingly concealed from any typical tourist site or local traffic. They reported that the object they were perceiving seemed crucial, guarded, and revered. In the session notes, it is described as a container fashioned of wood, gold, and silver, reminiscent of biblical descriptions of the Ark. A particularly intriguing detail involved the mention of another container inside of it. Traditional religious texts speak of the Ark holding stone tablets, Aaron's rod, and possibly a pot of manna, although different denominations and commentaries vary on these details. The viewer's statement that the container had its own nested container might align with the concept of multiple relics residing within the Ark, or it could be metaphorical impressions. Still, synergy between the viewer's words and the biblical version of the Ark stands out. The session also touched on protection, references to entities or spirits defending this object, employing some force that was unknown to us. This emphasis on supernatural guardians closely mirrors the reverence and caution described in religious accounts. Some biblical narratives detail dire consequences for individuals who touched or mishandled the Ark. The remote viewer's notes even mention that forcibly breaking into this container would bring destruction upon the intruder, an eerie reflection of biblical warnings. By 10:45 a.m., the session concluded. Those who analyzed the transcript deemed it a success, in the sense that the viewer appeared to have excellent sight contact. After the session, once the viewer discovered they had been describing the Ark, it further solidified the impression that the target was, in fact, an ancient religious artifact hidden away. However, no subsequent official operation or archaeological expedition appears in the released documents. Critics like Joe McMoneagle have consequently dismissed the session as mere speculation, pointing out that without verifying the actual location or unearthing the Ark itself, the claims remain anecdotal. From an intelligence standpoint, the session's data lacked immediate practical application. Nonetheless, it captured interest as an unconventional attempt to solve a millennia-old mystery. Notable details from the declassified document. The declassified file offers a detailed glimpse into what the viewer saw or sensed during that pivotal 1988 session. These notes, peppered with sketches, short phrases, and even descriptive adjectives, give a raw, unfiltered look at how remote viewing data was recorded in real time. One of the earliest revelations in the text is the mention of Arabic language, establishing the location as somewhere in the Middle East. Additionally, phrases like mosque domes and people in white robes point to a setting that could be in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, or other regions where such attire and architecture are common. The viewer described an underground environment that was dark and wet, calling attention to possible water seepage or humidity typical of subterranean spaces. The mention of mummies lined up against a wall stands out. While the presence of mummies is usually associated with Egypt, this viewer felt they were in a location that might not immediately bring to mind Egyptian tomb. The session notes left a question next to that detail. Watched by whom? This cryptic reference to watchers or guardians suggests the possibility of some ancient protective presence. It remains unclear whether these mummies were literal mummies or if the viewer chose that term to describe human remains or statues. Another strong image in the notes focuses on the container. The viewer used terms like wood, gold, silver, and seraphim, which resonates with biblical accounts of the Ark featuring cherubim on its cover. The reference to seraphim might be the viewer's own language or an interpretation of winged figures. Many biblical scholars note that the top of the Ark is said to have two winged beings overshadowing the mercy seat, though the Hebrew text typically uses the word cherubim. The remote viewing transcript, however, includes seraphim, which in some traditions are considered even higher angelic beings. This difference in wording could be a small discrepancy or a personal interpretation that the viewer found easier to articulate. The session notes mention the phrase resurrection, along with information, lessons, historical knowledge far beyond what we now know. Believers in the Ark's spiritual power often claim that it's more than just a relic. It might contain hidden wisdom, or it might be a conduit for divine energy. The possibility that the Ark holds advanced knowledge or secrets about ancient civilization stokes curiosity in both religious and non-religious communities. Even among mainstream scholars, there is recognition that many ancients possessed more advanced engineering or medical know-how than once assumed, so a notion of hidden knowledge might not be as outlandish as it appears at first glance. Also critical is the discussion around the Ark's lock system or mechanism. The viewer insisted that only those who were authorized could open it. Unauthorized attempts would meet with disaster. In the biblical context, mishandling the Ark results in lethal consequences, ranging from plagues to individuals being struck down. The remote viewer's statements fit neatly into that tradition, reinforcing the notion that the Ark is not just an inert artifact, but one with guardianship built into its very existence. Ancient Egyptian connections. The potential Egyptian link is one of the most debated aspects of the Ark's origin story, and the declassified remote viewing document draws extra attention to it. Egypt holds a powerful sway over biblical narratives, since Moses, according to the Book of Exodus, was born to Hebrew parents but raised in the Egyptian royal court. He would have seen Egyptian religious ceremonies, temple complexes, and the elaborate rituals surrounding the deceased. Many chests or shrines in Egypt were indeed outfitted with gold overlays, winged figures, and special compartments. Similarities in design might not be accidental. Ancient cultures shared a great deal of influence through trade, warfare, and migration. For instance, coffin-like containers with decorative features, especially winged or protective symbols, were not unusual in pharaonic tombs. Some depictions from Egyptian temples show priests and deities standing around gilded boxes, sometimes holding rings or rods. When remote viewer number 32 spoke of seraphim and mummies, one might speculate that some form of Egyptian tradition lingered in the Ark's representation, or in how it was hidden after it disappeared from Jerusalem. In addition, the biblical timeline for Moses places him around the 15th to 13th century BCE. If we treat that chronology as approximate, it could correspond with the period when certain Egyptian practices were well established. During the 18th dynasty, for example, Pharaoh Akhenaten introduced a form of monotheistic worship focusing on the sun disk Aton, or Aten. While historians still debate the exact influence of Akhenaten's religious changes on emerging Israelite beliefs, it is clear that Egyptian theology included many concepts like cosmic order, wings symbolizing protection, and the concept of divine guardians that could blend with or inform early Hebrew religious structures. Some alternative scholars go further, suggesting Moses might have learned advanced techniques for constructing an object charged with spiritual or even electrical energy. These theories can veer into speculative territory, linking biblical plagues, rods turning to serpents, or miraculous events to lost Egyptian knowledge of electromagnetism or other natural forces. Mainstream Egyptologists tend to focus on the more tangible connections, iconography, building materials, and shared motifs. Yet these more speculative ideas remain popular, partly because they fit the dramatic sense that the Ark was more than just a ceremonial item. The mention of mummies in the session notes also prompts reflection on how the Ark might be stored. If the Ark was tucked away in an ancient vault that once belonged to a pharaonic official or a line of caretaker priests, the presence of embalmed remains would not be surprising. Another angle is that mummies could be figurative or even statues resembling humanoid forms. The remote viewer's impressions might have led them to interpret upright shapes in low light as mummies. In either case, the image fosters an association of Egyptian funerary or religious traditions with the Ark's final resting place. Even outside direct textual parallels, the broad cultural exchange in the Eastern Mediterranean ensures that Egyptian concepts found their way into Canaan and vice versa. Some see the Ark as a prime example of that cross-pollination, the literal manifestation of how a group emerging from Egyptian captivity created its own religious identity. The CIA remote viewing angle just adds another interesting, if uncorroborated, dimension to an already fertile field of speculation about how the Ark's design and meaning might echo the grandeur and mystique of ancient Egyptian civilization. Ethiopia's claims. Perhaps the most famous claim to holding the Ark comes from Ethiopia. According to Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the Ark was brought there by Menelik III, believed by Ethiopia's ancient monarchy to be the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The story states that Menelik journeyed to Jerusalem, discovered his royal lineage, and returned to Ethiopia with the Ark. He then placed it in the city of Aksum. Today, the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum is considered by local believers to house the Ark or a direct replica. Only a single guardian monk is allowed inside, and no official outside verification has ever been undertaken. This lack of public access stokes controversy and curiosity, but the Ethiopian Church's unwavering stance is that the Ark is indeed there. Beyond Ethiopia, there are suggestions that the Ark may reside somewhere else in Africa. Some legends place it in the region of Lake Tana, also in Ethiopia, while others claim it migrated through Africa to places like Zimbabwe or even down to South Africa. Typically, these theories rely on anecdotal accounts, old travelers' tales, or local oral traditions linking communities to a lost biblical treasure. Some scholars also point to southern Arabia, specifically Yemen or Oman. In antiquity, there were robust trade roads and cultural exchanges between the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. The mention of a white mosque in the CIA's remote viewing document could align with a Middle Eastern site near the coast or in a mountainous region. Caves, hidden tunnels, or fortress-like structures in these areas might feasibly store an artifact such as the Ark. Exploring these possibilities is complicated by local politics, religious sensitivities, and practical considerations. In Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church's claim is not just a religious statement, but also a matter of national pride. Any attempt by foreign archaeologists to examine the Ark at Aksum would deeply offend local religious authorities. Similarly, searching or excavating in certain Middle Eastern countries can be fraught with legal and logistical barriers due to ongoing conflicts or government restrictions. Remote viewing data from 1988 that notes a Middle Eastern setting, Arabic speech, and individuals wearing white robes does not necessarily point to Ethiopia. However, it cannot be ruled out that the viewer was describing a place with a cultural overlap, since certain parts of Ethiopia also have Arabic influences, and many individuals in the region dress in white robes for religious ceremonies. But the presence of a mosque typically indicates an Islamic environment, pointing more strongly to a location outside Ethiopia's largely Ethiopian Orthodox context. Still, the Ethiopian claim remains highly visible, partly because it's a living tradition that invests the Ark with day-to-day reverence. Whether it is the real Ark, a revered replica, or a symbolic vessel is a subject of intense debate. The CIA's documents do not specifically reference Ethiopia, but the broader posture of searching for the Ark through unconventional means draws attention to all possible claims, fueling a sense that if the Ark still exists, it might be discovered in one of these storied spots eventually. Guardian spirits and unknown power. One of the more dramatic aspects of the remote viewing document is its attention to alleged entities or spirits that guard the Ark. This echoes a long-standing belief that the Ark is far from a passive artifact. Many biblical narratives describe lethal consequences for those who mishandle it. There's the famous case of Uzzah, who died upon touching the Ark as King David transported it on a cart, 2 Samuel 6:6-7. Another biblical account says that some townsfolk experience plagues and terror after unauthorized contact with the Ark. These stories portray the Ark as the seat of divine power, not just a container of stone tablets. In the remote viewer's description, individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us. That phrase, unknown power, suggests something beyond conventional weaponry or traps. Could it be referencing advanced technology, a spiritual force, or simply the viewer's interpretation of biblical warning. Those who support the remote viewing data see continuity between ancient stories and modern psychic impressions. Skeptics point out that mainstream knowledge about the Ark already includes those details, so it's easy for a viewer's subconscious to manufacture them. Yet many cultures do speak of objects with inherent protective qualities, sometimes curses, sometimes guardians who remain on the spiritual plane. Such themes appear in Egyptian tomb curses, medieval Christian relic lore, and even in modern pop culture about haunted items or cursed treasures. The Ark, given its biblical significance, holds a prime place in this tradition of powerful, safeguarded objects. It also resonates with the idea of divine or angelic presences. The mention of seraphim or cherubim with wings on top of the lid only reinforces the notion that the Ark was intimately linked with the heavenly realm. To some religious believers, the Ark's guardianship underscores the seriousness of approaching holy things. In many faiths, sacrilege, an improper approach to the sacred, has dire repercussions. This concept can extend metaphorically to modern times. The Ark stands as a reminder of the moral and spiritual responsibilities humans bear. For example, the Catholic Church has many traditions concerning relics that should not be touched or viewed casually, and certain aspects of Islamic tradition also emphasize respecting sacred sites and objects with the utmost reverence. Some modern authors propose that the Ark might contain or channel an unseen form of energy, whether it be electromagnetic charges, radiation from special materials, or something else unknown. They attempt to reconcile biblical references to blazing light or scorching heat with scientific concepts. A handful of theories reference the gold, plating, wooden core, and certain physical dimensions as clues that the Ark might generate static electricity or something more exotic. Although lacking conclusive evidence, these speculations add to the Ark's mystique. Thus, the mention of guardians in the declassified CIA document fits snugly into a broad culture of wonder and dread surrounding this fabled chest, reinforcing the belief that discovering or disturbing the Ark improperly could provoke cataclysmic consequences. Limits of remote viewing. Despite these enthralling aspects, skeptics and even seasoned remote viewers like Joe McMoneagle point out inherent limitations in using remote viewing for historical or mythical targets. McMoneagle famously stated that applying remote viewing to mysteries such as UFOs, lost civilizations, or relics like the Ark of the Covenant can produce interesting data but cannot be verified unless the artifact is found. Thus, from his perspective, the 1988 session is more of a training target or imaginative exercise than an actionable intelligence operation. Critics within the scientific community remain unconvinced by remote viewing claims in general. They highlight the difficulty of replicating consistent results under controlled conditions and the risk of confirmation bias. Because remote viewing often delivers symbolic imagery, even experts in the field acknowledge it can be subjective. When someone sees an underground vault or feels an energy, that might be shaped by personal beliefs, prior knowledge, or external cues. Another challenge is that participants, especially in unmonitored or insufficiently controlled situations, can inadvertently pick up on subtle hints. Even a stray mention that the target is in the Middle East or is significant from a cultural standpoint might direct the viewer's imagination. The 1988 session tried to mitigate this by using a sealed envelope containing the words Ark of the Covenant. Yet the question remains: could the viewer detect unconscious signals from the monitor or tap into widely held cultural images of the Ark? And if they read biblical accounts earlier in life, might that surface subconsciously? Moreover, government documents about remote viewing typically lack the next steps to confirm the findings. If the CIA truly believed the Ark was discovered in a damp subterranean chamber, one would expect to see mentions of field research or at least additional intelligence methods used to investigate. there is no sign of further operational tasks arising from this session. This lack of follow-up undercuts any claim that the data was robust enough to act upon. Even so, proponents emphasize that remote viewing does not claim to yield complete answers with perfect clarity. Instead, it's described as glimpses or partial snapshots. If the process was purely for training or exploration, it might have been simply recorded and shelved. Enthusiasts argue that had the government been more open to verifying the results, they might have uncovered extraordinary evidence. However, the high level of risk and the minimal likelihood of clear success likely discouraged any serious attempt. Ultimately, the 1988 ARK session highlights both the fascination and the pitfalls of using psychic approaches to solve ancient riddles. The CIA's involvement doesn't confirm the accuracy of remote viewing, but it does confirm official willingness to test unorthodox methods. For an artifact as legendary as the ARK, the method remains overshadowed by the broader question: if it is truly hidden somewhere, how can the world confirm its existence beyond speculation? Thanks for watching another episode. While you are still here, make sure to click the video on your screen for more quality content.